For the benefit of all sentient beings, please generate the Supreme Bodhicitta. Next, we will study the Analects. Why should we study this classical text? Actually, the importance of studying the Analects has already been discussed, so everyone should be clear about it. The reason why we are talking about this is as follows. In today's society, there is actually a great need for moral standards. At the same time, we also need this kind of knowledge. That's one important aspect of it. There's another significant aspect as well. Some of us Buddhists may really think that as a Buddhist, I should study the sutras and treatises of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Why should we study some worldly knowledge, including Confucian thought or other forms of secular knowledge? In fact, as devoted Buddhists, of course, the most fundamental and crucial thing for us to do is to lay a very solid and unshakable foundation in the teachings of Buddhism, which is essential for our spiritual journey and understanding. To master the 5 great treatises and the teachings of Vajrayana, this is absolutely indispensable. But at the same time, we actually also need worldly knowledge and practical understanding. To conduct oneself and handle affairs, one must understand and be proficient in these areas. If you are not proficient, in the end, your own spiritual practice may not truly succeed, and you might find it challenging. Many people fail in their personal conduct and actions, and as a result, all of their spiritual practice cannot continue at all, let alone spreading the Dharma and benefiting sentient beings. Therefore, it is also very much necessary and important to consider, to learn about the outstanding traditional cultures of various ethnic groups around the world. There is another important aspect. I think it was when I was teaching the words of my perfect teacher, I talked about why we study Buddhism. At that time, I also mentioned it is a fascinating concept that actually, in some Buddhist views and teachings, the revered founders and principal figures of both Confucianism and Taoism, in fact, according to various historical accounts, are widely said to be direct manifestations of certain enlightened Buddhas and compassionate Bodhisattvas. There are such claims as well, especially in the Tripitaka. Specifically within the Taisho Tripitaka, there is a particular text called the Chronicle of the Buddhas and Patriarchs. In the Chronicle of the Buddhas and Patriarchs, it is also mentioned that in the Sutra of Pure Conduct, there are indeed 3 significant bodhisattvas, and they are actually, respectively, one is the revered Bodhisattva Moonlight, whose wisdom illuminates the path. It is widely claimed that Bodhisattva Moonlight was reborn as the esteemed Yan Hui, and similarly Bodhisattva Rutu became the profound Confucius, while Bodhisattva Kashyapa became the influential Laozi. These are indeed such notable claims that are often discussed. However, regarding this Sutra of Pure Conduct, there are also some doubts about it. Is it really included in the Buddhist scriptures? In fact, this sutra should date back to the Tang dynasty, and it has already been discovered in Dunhuang, so it is indeed an ancient scripture. Therefore, the treatises we are studying now are actually not without basis, especially in the case of Master Yongming Yanshu. In his collection of the Convergence of 10,000 Virtues, it is also mentioned that in the Sutra of the Arising of the World, the Buddha said, he sent 2 monks to the Han region to manifest and guide minds. The first being the founder of Taoism, Laozi, who was a manifestation of Bodhisattva Kashyapa. The second, the esteemed founder of Confucianism, that is to say, Confucius, was indeed a truly profound manifestation of Bodhisattva Rutong. We should clearly understand that from ancient times to today, there have actually been bodhisattvas benefiting sentient beings, many of whom have secretly manifested in various forms as bodhisattvas. They come to this world to liberate sentient beings. If that is the case, then when we study the teachings of Confucius now, we can understand In fact, he is a manifestation of Bodhisattva Rutong. I also mentioned this just the other day, that in some of our very ancient and revered Tibetan cultural traditions, there is also the profound belief that Confucius is a manifestation of a compassionate and enlightened Bodhisattva, especially when it comes to some of our intricate divination practices. Mipam Rinpoche wrote a very thick and comprehensive book, which is primarily about divination and omens. The profound origins of some of these related cultural practices come from the I Ching and Confucian thought. There are also such views regarding this. Therefore, as Buddhists, it is very necessary to be well read and knowledgeable. At the same time, indeed, in the past, it was a common occurrence, regardless of what kind of Buddhas or sages they were when they manifested. The great spiritual masters who appeared before many different sentient beings, the treatises they composed are also worthy of our study. From this perspective, as I just mentioned, if we look at what is stated in the Sutra of Pure Conduct, for example, whether it's the profound philosophy of Confucianism in China, or Taoism or Buddhism, these three traditions, Confucianism, Buddhism, and Taoism, actually do have certain connections with the teachings of Buddhism. Of course, as for some other sects, whether or not other religions acknowledge this, or indeed, if they even consider it at all, is another matter altogether. Because every scholar, when interpreting a certain body of knowledge or viewpoint, inherently has their own unique right of interpretation and their own distinct way of understanding. Some people believe, for example, whether images of Confucius or Lao Tzu can be reverently placed within a traditional Buddhist shrine. There are such opinions. Of course, if you have never really had this kind of habit before at all, and you are a purely Buddhist practitioner, I think there is no need to deliberately place these images, but if you have always been making offerings to them, I think leaving them there probably isn't an issue either, because the manifestations of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are diverse, and their teachings also encourage people to do good deeds. From the perspective of their doctrines, they have also endured for over 2,500 years without decline. This itself carries a very profound meaning. Therefore, when it comes to certain complex ideas, we should always have a much broader and more encompassing mind. We should consistently approach them with a truly open and receptive mindset and an attitude of inclusiveness. That might be a better way. Because the world we live in now is a truly very open world. If we confine ourselves to a limited scope, to a particularly narrow world, then it really might be hard to take even a single step forward. Or you could say it would feel suffocating. We would have to face many problems in many aspects. So we should adopt a mindset much like that of Buddhism. At the very least, Buddhist thought teaches that all sentient beings possess the Tathagata Garbha, the Buddha nature. In this sense, all sentient beings are future Buddhas. Whether they are heretics or demons, everyone is truly our distant friend indeed. When we talk about spiritual companions, and when Vajrayana Buddhism speaks of the 4 kinds of spiritual companions, there are general companions, distant companions, close companions, secret companions, and so on. There are many, many companions on the path of practice. In this way, even those so-called outsiders whom we tend to reject are actually also among our spiritual companions. With this perspective, we should regard sentient beings. There is not one who is not close to us. From this perspective, we can embrace all kinds of cultures and all kinds of knowledge in the world. This is very necessary. We can accept various cultures and knowledge. This is very important. Now, as for what we discussed above, the meaning of the Analects has already been explained. There are 492 chapters. We have already explained the first chapter of the text. I don't know, as for what is discussed here, roughly how much time we will need, it depends on the situation. Anyway, if we can finish it, that's good. If we can't finish, that's fine too. Because I don't have the oral transmission, there's no issue of breaking the oral transmission, and you don't have any either. So whenever the environmental conditions are absolutely right and suitable for us, we'll just keep studying. Whenever the conditions or if we can't continue teaching or studying, it's no big deal either. Actually, the content found within the Analects often significantly overlaps with some Buddhist scriptures. It's scattered, all dispersed in different places, or you could say like the royal treasury, just like all kinds of different treasures. It lacks a sequential logical structure and doesn't have the systematic analytical framework that we use in Tibetan Buddhism with its layer-by-layer scholarly divisions. It doesn't have that. Some of the content here is indeed about morality, about ethical conduct. Some of it is truly about language, and some is also about politics and effectively governing a country. There are also parts about culture and so on. So there is a really wide variety of different content available. Of course, this content, most of it is still entirely applicable and highly relevant for us even in the present day. But there are some parts, wisdom from more than 2,500 years of ancient history ago, that are actually somewhat difficult to apply nowadays. Of course, the language here is still very concise and to the point, succinct, streamlined, and especially practical. This is a characteristic that Chinese writing still possesses. Some people think that spoken and written language are the same, but actually, on one hand, spoken and written language do share similarities. But if the written language is refined, it can be passed down from generation to generation. You see, many ancient Chinese texts are still the same today. People can fully understand them as soon as they read them. But when it comes to spoken language, it might be different. Chinese has all kinds of dialects. The same goes for our Tibetan language and other ethnic groups' languages. In some places there is spoken language but no written script. In some places there is a written script but the spoken language has disappeared. There are still a few ethnic groups like this today. So here, what we know is that for many young people, perhaps this classical writing is rather awkward and quite difficult to read and even to fully comprehend, and its content is not something that can be easily or readily understood. But for those individuals who are somewhat genuinely interested in literature, the language in these texts should be extremely concise and profoundly meaningful, and it certainly possesses its own truly unique and distinctive characteristics. Now next, we will smoothly move on to the second chapter. Next is Yuzi. Yuzi is also known as Yuru. He was a devoted disciple of the revered Confucius. It is widely said that he was precisely 33 years younger than the great Confucius. He was also highly respected and held in great esteem. After Confucius, the revered master, passed away, some people earnestly wanted Yuzi to succeed him as the new leader. However, it seems that Zhengzi, a prominent disciple and a few other influential figures at that particular time, did not particularly agree with this. In any case, among all of Confucius's many esteemed disciples, he certainly held a significant level of prestige. In the Analects, when introducing all the disciples, if it truly begins with the name Yuzi, then perhaps there is some significance to that. So this entire section consists of the words of his disciples. That's why I mentioned the other day that in the Analects, some parts are Confucius's own words. Some are dialogues between him and his disciples, and there are also some sections that are entirely, especially in the last one or two chapters, mainly exchanges among the disciples themselves, where Confucius does not appear. So here, these are indeed the words of Yuzi. As for his insightful words, some esteemed scholars firmly believe that we especially admire the words of Confucius, but as his disciples, after all, they were still in the process of learning and did not yet possess fully developed or comprehensive ideas on the subject. Consequently, such views are not widely accepted or embraced. Some professors and scholars also hold this opinion. But I believe that in fact when it comes to the words of Confucius's students, if you acknowledge Confucius's words, then his students must have truly grasped Confucius's profound thinking, and their insightful words are even more accurate than much of the random talk we have today. They truly inherited Confucius's genuine and authentic ideas. So no matter which religion it is, or in any particular field of knowledge, there are certainly various different sects and groups where the masters and their disciples possess the same kind of authority. Just like in Buddhism, many of our scriptures, including the Heart Sutra that we often recite, were actually spoken by Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva after being blessed by the Buddha, with the Venerable Avalokiteshvara delivering the profound teaching. At most, the Buddha would simply say, excellent, excellent indeed, right? It's just like this. So sometimes, perhaps some scriptures are like this as well. So here as well, I think for all of us, it is profoundly important, no matter which particular disciple's teachings it is. We can treat them as if they are Confucius' own words. Treating them exactly the same might be better. Otherwise, if you start dividing Confucius' disciples into first-rate talents, second-rate talents, and then further down the line, as time progresses, it might be unclear whether that's reasonable or not. Perhaps it is not necessarily entirely reasonable to think in that particular way. So, from the rich culture of the ancients, we can also clearly observe that. What do we observe? For example, whether it's a revered master or a respected teacher from a certain school, his profound ideas among his direct lineage disciples, some of them have indeed received them in the same way, and may even have surpassed him. Just like the story of Master Vasubandhu, Vasubandhu had 4 exceptional disciples who truly surpassed him, including the distinguished Master Sthiramati and several other notable figures. Similarly, when it comes to prominent Confucius, perhaps his disciples surpassed him. Even if they did not surpass him, we should still be able to accept his ideas. Next, let's talk about the following. The following is what Master Yuzi said. Those who are filial and respectful to their elders, yet like to defy their superiors, are rare indeed. Those who do not like to defy their superiors, yet enjoy causing disorder, have never existed. The root text is like this. Here he explains that filial piety is very important, being respectful and devoted to people. Being very filial and respectful to one's parents, and being especially kind to one's brothers and sisters, such a person actually is rarely the kind who like to rebel and cause trouble. In other words, to stir up trouble. Such people are very few indeed, because if you are especially and truly filial at home, treating your parents and siblings very well, and have always been very, very good to them since childhood, then whether in society or in the country at large, it is extremely rare for such a person to frequently do things that throw the world into chaos. Basically, it is very uncommon, except for a very few rare cases. It simply doesn't happen. What is the reason for this? Generally speaking, people are truly creatures of habit indeed. Family education is extremely important. If within the family someone treats their parents and siblings especially well, then when they enter society, they will also treat people of higher status, people of middle status, and people of lower status with their own sense of care and protect them. They won't keep doing extremely unreasonable things, because from a very young age, they've developed a certain emotional bond with them. Actually, what he's saying here is, if someone is very good to their family at home, and their parents are also very good to them, then the concepts of filial piety and brotherly love here. Some people think that Confucianism, especially its ancient ideas, teaches that no matter whether parents are reasonable or not, one must always show them utmost respect. But that's actually not the case. In fact, when some ancient scholars explain this, if parents treat their children well, then the children are also truly very filial and deeply devoted to their beloved parents. There is a mutual relationship between them. They should also consider each other's perspectives. Of course, if the parents treat the child very badly, beyond just strict academic supervision and discipline, if they genuinely treat him very poorly indeed, then in such circumstances, it is understandable if the children are not very filial. This is also something that makes sense. This is something we've learned before as well. There are also such views present in certain aspects of Confucian thought. So in this sense, people who are filial are generally considered to be rarely those who go against common sense. Such rebels are very few. Those who are not rebellious and do not cause trouble are almost non-existent. If an individual rarely causes any trouble or disturbances and consistently refrains from creating any kind of disruption or unrest in the presence of their teacher, and furthermore does not act against or betray them in any manner whatsoever, then such people who would rebel are almost non-existent, because whether at home or with their teacher, if they are very respectful, then their behavior should be very proper and in accordance with the rules. Their overall conduct as well. Even in our worldly society, this is the case. It seems that this is also true among Tibetans. I've heard that in Japan and many other places, including Korea, it is also quite similar in numerous locations. For example, when we are actively recruiting someone for a position, we meticulously look at how this individual genuinely gets along with their family members. If it's in a typical school setting, for example, we see how their relationship is with their teachers. If it's in a monastery, we look at how they interact with their teacher, the manager, and others. If these relationships are good, then when they enter society, if you hire them, it will also be very good. Generally, when we recruit people, we might want to understand their background. Just like in the secular world, for example, whether it's men and women looking for romantic partners or preparing for marriage, before any of this happens, many people will thoroughly investigate their family background, whether they have money, a house, or other valuable material possessions. That's how people are nowadays. But actually, it should be about what their family is like and how this person treats their parents. If this person treats their parents well, then there is ample room for further consideration and discussion, because they already possess some essential qualities. This is indeed the case. Otherwise, if someone truly doesn't have a very good relationship with their parents and also doesn't have a good relationship with their immediate family, then what happens next? And doesn't get along well with their colleagues either. Then when such a person enters society, maybe for the first 2 or 3 days before people really know them, it's fine. But over time, their true nature will be completely exposed. And in the end, it may be very difficult for them to survive in this world. So generally speaking, people who are very filial almost never become those who bring chaos to the world. Therefore, as a gentleman, one must attend to the fundamentals. When it comes to attending to the fundamentals, the most fundamental thing is the very foundation of learning is filial piety. When the foundation is established, the way naturally arises. If this foundation is present, if filial piety, this foundation, is already there, then the path of life can, in a very short time, unfold right before your eyes. As for the way here, it truly refers to the entire path of life, not merely the physical road we actually walk on. Everything in our lives, every single aspect can indeed unfold, can be clearly revealed. That is why it is said, filial piety and brotherly respect are the roots of benevolence. So here it says that filial piety and brotherly respect should be the foundation of all benevolence. Because we know in Confucian culture, the foundation of all culture is ritual and benevolence. As for the word benevolence, it is the most important. Therefore, in our Analects, as some esteemed scholars have previously said before, it is indeed the most frequently mentioned concept, the word that appears the most often. Some say it appears 104 times, others say 109 times. But regardless of the exact number, the Analects indeed places special emphasis on benevolence. As for benevolence, in ancient times, they used benevolence to express the profound idea of love within one's heart. In our modern language, perhaps using the word love is the most fitting. In Mahayana Buddhism, compassion and bodhicitta are central. Compassion and bodhicitta are forms of love, but this kind of love is not a narrow self-centered love, nor is it the self-liberating love of the Shravaka path, which focuses solely on individual enlightenment. Rather, the true love in Mahayana Buddhism arises from deep within for all sentient and conscious beings and is an unconditional, profound kind of love. So, what exactly are we truly talking about here? We're talking about the very foundation of everything, which is actually summed up quite succinctly in the profound word filial piety. Now, when it comes to the concept of filial piety, many people today might genuinely think that filial piety is a very old concept and not suitable anymore. Filial piety is a very ancient idea and not appropriate, especially in Western culture. In certain aspects of contemporary Western culture, the fundamental relationship between children and their parents often appears to be characterized by a remarkably rational and logical approach. It is often governed by laws or by certain established rules. So, in the present day, some individuals often say that Western culture is exclusively about being reasonable and logical, lacks emotional considerate. As for Eastern culture, it truly values both reason and emotion. And this reasonableness, is only acceptable when it's based on emotion. If there is no emotion, then relationships between people become very cold and indifferent. And they also become especially pragmatic, whether it's among relatives, between spouses, between teachers and students, or between parents and their children. If there are only interests and absolutely no genuine feelings, then such a society truly, in the very end, becomes extremely pragmatic and self-serving. When necessary, there may be no sense of gratitude, no intention to repay kindness. No so-called sense of filial piety. So nowadays, some young people among us are influenced by certain aspects of Western culture. In fact, Western culture is indeed outstanding. In many respects, Easterners may not necessarily be able to keep up. This includes their scientific and technological knowledge, as well as their concepts of the rule of law and the sense of social responsibility each individual has. There are many aspects that are truly worth learning from, but what is lacking? It is the element of emotion or feeling, our concept of qing, emotion or sentiment. The concepts of love and benevolence may not be particularly emphasized or promoted in this regard. So each individual person thinks if there's some personal benefit or interest for me, I will do this thing. If there isn't much personal benefit for me, then even if this matter is very good and is beneficial to society and the country, many people still tend to put their own personal interests first and foremost. So, in this particular way, when compared to some of the fundamental ideas and concepts found within Mahayana Buddhism, there are indeed some distinctly different perspectives and viewpoints that emerge. So in this case, here we say, the root of all paths is actually filial piety. This is very important. At the very beginning, it is said that if there is filial piety, so regardless of what kind of social group or community you find yourself in, those who may be extremely successful and prosperous, including various companies or certain accomplished individuals, when you want to recruit or hire a particular person, take a look at how this person treats their parents. This is very crucial. If someone treats their parents, their teachers, or their mentors with complete indifference, showing no regard, or even often causes trouble, then whatever other strengths or positive merits this person has, these are all quite questionable. There is a well-known saying in our ancient proverbs that states, "The Dragon King possesses many valuable treasures on his head, but despite their allure, many people do not dare to take them." Why? Because they are surrounded by poisonous gas. It's very dangerous. It's the same principle. A person with poor character, even if they have merits and talent, people are still very cautious around them. This is because their character might, in some situations, be quite unpredictable. Their poisonous gas could contaminate those around them, even if in some aspects they each possess their own unique strengths and distinct advantages, whether it is their inherent talent or their striking appearance. No matter which area they have a particular talent in, it truly makes people envious. But if the foundation of their character as a whole, what we're truly talking about here is if they truly lack character, then it's really difficult for them to have other virtues. So nowadays, some college students often think of themselves as being very talented, incredibly smart, and truly wise indeed. And these are all very good qualities to have, but if they truly lack the basic foundation of being a good person, maybe at first, whether it's a company or an organization, various places will accept you, but after a certain point in time, it becomes, if you can't handle social skills and interpersonal relationships. So this issue as well, on the surface, these words seem very simple. But in reality, I think many of us should also reflect on ourselves and observe ourselves, because this is an education in personal character. People in ancient times placed great importance on character.
But what about now? Nowadays, people value talent and ability very highly. These are completely different things. People in ancient times believed that character should be the foundation, and only then did they talk about talent, education, and the humanities, and then about other things. But perhaps that's not how we do things now. So in this regard, it's really necessary. Everyone can privately compare this for themselves. This is indeed a very significant second chapter of this text. The third chapter says, the master said, this is Confucius speaking, clever words and a pleasing appearance are seldom associated with true benevolence. It's just these few words. This is a whole chapter. After finishing a chapter, take a sip of water, all right? If that's the case, with its extensive 492 chapters, I will certainly have to drink that considerable amount. So, if we look at this particular chapter quite literally, it refers to individuals who skillfully use clever words and possess a pleasing and attractive appearance. Everyone knows what clever words means. It means someone who speaks in a very flowery and crafty way, who is very eloquent and can make everything sound convincing. Wow, some people speak Mandarin so beautifully, it's truly amazing and wonderful to hear. And they can explain any principle or reasoning. Wow, this person is really impressive. And then there's pleasing appearance. As for pleasing appearance, what it means, they put on a friendly and pleasant face, and their facial expressions are also very expressive. Whether it's their speaking style, in many ways they are quite special. They not only have expressions, but also perform as they speak, combining speech with performance. Sometimes they're also especially humorous and so on. But among people like this, very few are truly loyal or genuinely compassionate. Because they speak so remarkably well and their expressions are so incredibly rich and vivid, their inner feelings may not necessarily be that sincere or authentic. So, regarding this particular and significant chapter, many truly wise and insightful people since ancient times have offered different interpretations. Some believe that on the surface it appears this way, but in fact this is not a derogatory term. What is meant here is that although some people speak very well, and their expressions, conduct, and all aspects are quite good, but among them there aren't really, or perhaps it is more accurate to say, there are very few individuals who are truly loyal to the cause, demonstrating unwavering commitment. Some people say that language and physical expression are not that important. What most important is, one must have genuine sincerity in the heart, have this kind of benevolent love and deep compassion, and must definitely possess a profound kind of inner genuineness, inner authenticity, and complete truthfulness. If we truly love others in our hearts, if we genuinely like others, then even if our manner of speech and the way we express ourselves are not particularly skillful or refined, or if our facial expressions and overall demeanor are rather stiff and unengaging, not especially interesting or captivating to others. In fact, this is still really very important indeed. So here we can approach this from two different perspectives and angles. On one hand, if a person hasn't put great effort and dedicated work into cultivating their heart and mind, but only focuses on superficial language or facial expressions, then, in terms of how they handle matters and interact with others, it may not last for very long and may not be very successful indeed. But on the other hand, if we carefully look at some significant aspects of today's modern culture, of course, a person's inner heart is truly very important. On the solid foundation of a truly kind and deeply loving heart, our language and expressions are also very important. Nowadays, in what is called communication studies, many companies frequently provide training on various things like consider how one might genuinely smile at people and how to effectively serve others. If deep down within your true self, you really don't want to smile. You still have to smile on the surface. They even have you hold a chopstick in your mouth and practice for a long period of time. This is also part of their current corporate culture. They specifically study communication skills. Because when it comes to inner communication, actually in many corporate trainings, they don't really emphasize one thing in particular, which is inner communication. Actually, the best thing in a person is a kind heart, just like in the way of the Bodhisattva. When you see a stranger, you must greet them with a pleasant and friendly expression, or treat them with a compassionate gaze. Even when giving directions, you shouldn't just use one finger. The house is right there. Instead, you should politely say, "It's right over there in that general direction." There's nothing funny or amusing about this. Usually we should use our palm like this. This is a polite way, like extending your right palm and explaining it that way. One should have a genuinely good and pleasant facial expression. This aspect is still very important. Otherwise, in our everyday daily lives, indeed proper and effective human communication is still extremely important. Regardless of whether a person is good or bad at heart, some people, it seems, when they see others, for example, nowadays when you go shopping or when you interact with other people, some individuals look especially angry or even quite upset. They always have a stern face, looking particularly worried or upset. Whether they're pouring you tea or doing something else for you, they look especially sad. At first glance, you wonder, did their father pass away? Or did their mother pass away? Honestly, when our parents pass away, it's particularly painful and deeply heartbreaking for us, but some people still maintain that kind of very compassionate and merciful gaze, which they consistently carry with them in their daily life as well. Actually, this is indeed truly very important for people to consider, including what is often said in society nowadays. In the realm of public speaking, intonation accounts for a mere 3%, while the overall tone of voice significantly accounts for 38% of the message's impact. Body language makes up 55%. There is this kind of saying, right? Especially for those of us who spread the Dharma and benefit sentient beings, including when we communicate or give lectures externally, at such important times we should also have some appropriate facial expressions. Otherwise, if you only have one single expression, sometimes it can truly destroy a lot of valuable opportunities. A couple of years ago at our institute, a high-ranking official visited us once. When the official came, one of our Khenpos here, who was actually very wise, but his overall expression made everyone quite unhappy and discontented, because he was sitting at the table like this, wearing a pair of black sunglasses, and just sitting there like that. In the end, the official was really upset. He said, "When such a high-ranking official like me comes here, some of you always act in this particular manner every single day." Their secretary even took a clear photograph and sent it directly to us. Actually, he is usually a pretty cheerful and quite jovial person, but on that specific day, he was wearing dark sunglasses while attending the meeting there. In a certain sense, this situation is actually quite understandable. He is still relatively young and inexperienced, but because of his usual expression, which is always like that, perhaps when the leader came to visit, he maintained that same demeanor. He felt it was disrespectful or something. So sometimes, even a very simple action on our part, a seemingly small and unassuming gesture, can actually lead to profoundly different and far-reaching consequences. This is especially true, I think, whether it's a respected Dharma teacher or when we give presentation here. Some of our current expressions still need a bit of improvement and refinement in order to be more like those commonly found and utilized in the Western world, where every sentence is accompanied by various expressions and gestures. These are things we may not necessarily be able to do, but actually, if we could manage it, such a rich variety of expressions would undoubtedly leave people with a particularly positive and lasting good impression. However, if the entire process is always consistently and extremely painful and filled with significant discomfort, and then you just run away, that's not very good. In the future, when we provide lessons, including communication of the Dharma among Buddhists, you see in a lot of success studies in the world today, and in many corporate training programs, those skilled and experienced instructors also frequently exhibit such clear and compelling expressions, and they also consistently utilize very good, exceptionally eloquent, and highly persuasive language. They have various effective ways to get everyone's attention fully and completely focused with undivided attention. concentrated on themselves. So in this sense, such expressions are still very necessary. For example, in the past, in Singapore and some Western countries, when diligently studying, whether in a demanding high school environment or a rigorous university setting, there were always specialized and comprehensive interview training courses readily available to students. But now many schools don't have them. So when it comes time for interviews, students often don't know what to do or how to proceed. No matter what the situation is, they've never had any interview training before. This needs to be addressed in schools. Some of our teachers concerning these matters need to address it. Provide training for students on many behaviors they will face in the future to prepare them. Otherwise, if you say eloquent words and a pleasant countenance are seldom associated with true virtue, and you think you shouldn't use eloquent words or expressions, then when you look for a job, if you just sit there being extremely sincere or even looking very sad, no one might want you. On that day, whether it's your appearance or the words you utter, you should strive to appear more dignified and composed. Perhaps your inherent speaking skills aren't exceptionally great to begin with, but when you do speak, you should endeavor to pretend to be very eloquent and articulate. In this way, perhaps it really is something truly needed in today's modern society. So here, when Confucius talks about this, it's actually not inherently meant as a derogatory term. Of course, in our daily interactions and communications, we should still conscientiously align our spoken words and our subsequent actions, ensuring we don't express one thing verbally and then implicitly mean another. Otherwise, it's truly hard for people to fully rely on you. Just like it's clearly mentioned in the Samyukta Agama Sutra, inwardly feeling shame and disgust, yet verbally claiming agreement when taking action unwilling to cooperate. Thus we know this is not a true friend. It says that if someone is truly and genuinely a good friend, then whether it's in their daily interactions and dealings or in the way they consistently handle things, their intentions should always be consistent, both inside and out, without any deviation. It's not that they think one thing in their heart and say something else out, or when it comes to doing things in their actions, they make others do things they themselves are unwilling to do. That's not how it should be. If someone is truly a close friend, in reality, their words and actions are completely consistent and aligned with each other, and only such a person can truly be considered a person of genuine wisdom. That's one aspect of it, as we have already discussed. There's also another aspect, which is when someone explicitly says one thing, but actually means something entirely different. In another Buddhist text, the Sakya aphorisms mention this as well. To think one thing deeply in your heart, but say quite another, this is precisely what is commonly called cunning, and it is also precisely how foolish individuals often pretend to be learned. It says that some people think one particular thing deep their hearts, but say something completely different out loud. For example, I might actually really dislike you, but then say, wow, you're such a great person. I've long heard about your reputation. Oh, I've really wanted to meet you. In reality, this is the behavior of a cunning person. Nowadays, there are quite a lot of people like this. Indeed, there are some individuals within society who, perhaps because of their work or specific circumstances, or because their position and status force them to act this way. But in any case, this really isn't a good thing. Of course, you also can't be too blunt, saying whatever comes to mind. If you do that, maybe in this world, it might not always be appropriate either. So, the content we just discussed earlier can probably be understood in this way. In general, we should, sometimes using tactful words and a pleasant demeanor is necessary. Of course, Confucius said that those who use smooth talk and a pleasant appearance are rarely truly benevolent people. But in reality, if someone is truly benevolent and also uses tactful words and a pleasant demeanor, has skillful and expedient language, and a very kind expression, then perhaps, whether in dealing with significant matters or with individual people, they will do well in all aspects. Therefore, I also hope that we Buddhists, no matter what situation we are in, we should pay more attention to our words and actions. No need to pretend. What is meant here by tactful words and a pleasant demeanor might be that you clearly don't want to say something, but you force yourself to say it anyway. Or you obviously don't like something, but you deliberately act a certain way in front of someone, holding it in and forcing yourself to keep smiling. That kind of thing is really quite uncomfortable, right? Sometimes we are just, trying to maintain a facade, and it can be difficult to do so. For some people who naturally don't like to smile a lot, if we force them to smile, it feels a bit strange, doesn't it? That's not exactly what it truly means, but if there is love in your heart, even when you feel anger or criticize others, there is still a kind of smile, a very good one. This kind of love in your heart is very important. If you have this kind of love inside, then no matter what kind of situation you currently find yourself in, you will still possess skillful words and appropriate actions. This particular aspect is indeed very important. Really, sometimes, for example, when we go out shopping, like at a department store, when buying clothes, some people naturally make you feel like you have to buy that piece of clothing. They'll talk to you for a while as if you don't buy this piece of clothing, you're going to suffer a huge loss in your life. They'll go on and on about just how incredibly comfortable it is. Just keep on talking. And sometimes you see, wow, she's working really, really hard too. She's been talking for such a very, very long time. No matter what, you ultimately end up feeling some genuine compassion for her. Sometimes that's the case. Sometimes it's really true. So communication through language is very important for us humans. This includes some of our exchanges and communication in Buddhism as well. It's the same with these things. Some people only talk about the negative things, like our Dharma center isn't good enough, Dharma friends aren't good, learning isn't good enough, teacher isn't good, disciples aren't good. If you keep talking like that, when people hear it, they think, wow, this is so complicated, better not get involved. Not only do people not want to come and study, they don't even want to listen anymore. Later on, they'll just stay away, keep their distance, and not want to get close. This does happen. But if we speak sincerely and genuinely, that is also very necessary. So as Mipham Rinpoche also said, in the advice on the rules of conduct, he mentions that most of the intense hatred and deep friendships in the entire world, in fact, are caused by language. That's why we must be extremely cautious with our words. That's exactly the reason for saying this. Next, we'll discuss and examine Chapter 4, which is about Zhengzi. Zhengzi was also a very honest and straightforward person, not particularly fond of talking or speaking much, this kind of quiet disciple who was said to be 46 years younger than Confucius. From this, we can clearly see that actually, among Confucius's direct and most prominent disciples, they tended to be relatively young individuals. Within his lineage, there were quite a few younger people indeed. He is widely recognized as the esteemed author of The Great Learning, Daxu, a significant philosophical text, and was also highly learned. The Great Learning is actually a significant chapter within the records of the grand historian, Shiji. It was later excerpted, most probably during the Tang dynasty. Zheng Chan, Zhengzi's full and proper name was indeed Zheng Can. This is precisely what he said. Each day I examine myself on 3 points. Have I been faithful in my work for others? Have I been trustworthy in my dealings with friends? Have I practiced what I have been taught? Indeed, here he is profoundly explaining that each and every one of us should introspect ourselves multiple times throughout the day. We should reflect on ourselves 3 times a day. Some interpret this as meaning we should reflect 3 times a day. Some explain it as the 3 here means many times, a figurative number. In fact, everyone, every day, should frequently reflect on themselves many times. Some also say that the so-called 3 self-examinations means to observe oneself from 3 aspects. What are these 3 aspects? The first is, have I been loyal when working for others? When we do things for others, does loyal here truly mean whether I have done my absolute best? Here, loyalty might not necessarily mean loyalty in the usual conventional sense of the word. He says, when I do things for others, did I truly fulfill what I had promised at that time? Did I carry out my words? And in the end, in actual actions, did I really, truly put my heart and effort into doing this thing? Some people verbally agree, no problem, no problem. Okay, no problem, no problem. But in the end, absolutely nothing substantial comes of it. Everything just completely disappears. That's certainly not how it should be at all. When you make a solemn promise to genuinely do something for others, did you actually truly carry it out? Did you indeed do it wholeheartedly and with full effort? This is the first aspect to observe. The second aspect to observe, in the process of interacting with friends, have you been trustworthy? When I actually interact with others, as I mentioned the other day, it is important to consider that people from time to time have weaknesses in this regard. I might think that I am very trustworthy, that I am truly remarkable, but when you really carefully observe with reason, when you observe with wisdom, or when you use certain treatises on character to examine yourself, have you actually lived up to these standards? For example, if you are a Buddhist, you can measure yourself against ancient Buddhist texts. If you are a devoted follower of traditional culture, or if you are a diligent student of traditional culture, then use that as your standard of observation. At this point, when we interact with other friends, do we consistently maintain trustworthiness in all our communication and interactions? The things we promise in front of others, do we later genuinely carry them out as we should? Do we truly fulfill those commitments? How do I conduct myself in interpersonal relationships? Whether there is genuine sincerity, we should observe and examine in this way. The third point is, have I failed to practice what I've been taught? Regarding the various teachings that my teacher has transmitted to me, have I properly reviewed them, studied them thoroughly, and put them into actual practice? Or if I am going to teach a certain specific subject to my devoted disciples, then the content that I am passing on, have I actually reviewed it myself? Because if I am teaching others, but I have never reflected on it myself, and have never practiced it myself, then indeed I am being hypocritical because I can't even do it myself. In fact, yet I boast about it in front of others, and boast about it that is unreasonable and quite unfair. So here it should be that we observe from three aspects. How do I conduct myself and handle matters? How do I interact with my friends? How is my own spiritual practice going? From the perspective of Buddhism, how are we doing in serving all sentient beings? How are our relationships within our inner circle with family and friends? And then myself. How well have I truly practiced the profound teachings passed down to me by my lineage masters? How well have I diligently cultivated them? Actually, some of these words can be analyzed from many different angles and perspectives, including, in Buddhism, the idea of reflecting on oneself 3 times a day, for example. Every day when we wake up in the morning, while we go about our day, and before we go to sleep at night, we often use our right understanding and mindfulness to observe our body, speech, and mind. We look at what kind of thoughts and intentions arise within us and examine our words and actions. Are they in accordance with the Dharma and proper conduct? Do they benefit sentient beings? Are we diligently and consistently cultivating ourselves and so on in a meaningful way? Actually, there are many different possible interpretations of this particular matter. Nowadays, some people say that when it comes to reflecting on oneself 3 times a day, for many men, it means checking every single day whether they truly possess the qualities of being tall, rich, and handsome themselves. And for women, whether they possess the qualities of being fair-skinned, wealthy, and beautiful. There are also some people who say that reflecting on oneself 3 times a day means checking whether you currently possess a house, a car, or money. In short, nowadays, many people have different interpretations. That's perfectly fine too. You can observe yourself in any way that you truly like. How is your own personal spiritual practice going for you? Or we could simply say, how are you doing in class? How is your memorization? How are your living conditions? How is your diet? There are many aspects you can observe. This is what reflecting on oneself 3 times a day means. Of course, here, if we carefully look at what the ancients historically said, it might not actually be like this. The ancients generally would not particularly focus on such seemingly trivial matters. They mainly reflected on much greater, more profound principles. Some interpretations explicitly state that, for example, in the philosophical traditions of the East, these ideas were deeply explored and understood. Around 2,500 years ago, people would reflect on themselves. When reflecting, if they found mistakes, they would correct them. If there were no mistakes, they should also have a sense of trust in themselves, the sense of comfort. But Western culture is a bit different. In the West, when we humans first come naturally into this world, we are born with original sin. So, from the literal meaning of this concept, you can also clearly see that for people without a Christian background or a specific mindset, there is a certain ease, or you could say a difference in self-perception, compared to those individuals who possess such a background or come from a similar environment. Some people do indeed express this sentiment as well. But regardless of these perspectives and considerations, we truly feel that regularly reflecting on ourselves is still very important. Using right knowledge and right mindfulness, using wisdom, and using our own methods to frequently observe ourselves. Because sometimes when we eventually reach a certain significant point in our lives, we have no idea what we're actually doing. We may think that we are completely justified. However, what we do may not always be reasonable in some respects from our perspective, and may not always be rational either. Especially when a person gains a position of significant status or influence, it's very easy for them to become completely intoxicated and consumed by it. And when someone successfully acquires substantial wealth or considerable financial resources, it's also very easy to lose oneself. Someone who used to have right knowledge and right mindfulness, once acquiring wealth and riches, they will also become lost and confused. And when receiving praise and admiration from different people, one will also become bewildered and lose their proper way. At such times, confusion is inevitable. Therefore, those who are truly wise, indeed, no matter whether they find themselves in a high or low position, it is crucial for them to consistently and diligently examine and observe their own body, speech, and mind with careful introspection. They never abandon this practice. So, generally speaking, for Mahayana scholars and practitioners, they often observe their 3 gates. These are fundamental to their practice. This point is made very clear in the chapter on right knowledge and mindfulness of the way of the Bodhisattva. So, some of the ideas of the ancients really remind us that we should observe ourselves every day. If you don't examine yourself daily, if you go a day without self-reflection, your actions on that particular day could ultimately and potentially lead to a lifetime of profound regret. This includes some individuals in the Western world or those who choose to go and study in certain specific places, people who are relatively well off, who never reflect on themselves. They believe that everything they do is absolutely correct because they are widely and truly recognized by many people around them or even admired. At this particular point in time, people tend to become especially arrogant and overconfident. So in any of our teachings, especially when it comes to some teachers or certain leaders, if there are some unwise and foolish people around them who constantly flatter and praise excessively, it becomes very easy to make serious and significant mistakes. They keep saying things like, "Wasn't that exactly what we said the other day?" It was widely said that at a certain point in time, it's very hard for a person to recognize their own faults. That's why the ancients said, "I reflect on myself 3 times a day." This is still very necessary. This is especially true for practitioners. They should frequently observe their body, speech, and mind. They should often carefully examine their own intentions and thoughts. They should regularly reflect upon their 3 gates. Body, speech, and mind are the same as the 3 gates. This is quite very important. Let's talk about 2 more chapters. Chapter 5. All right. Chapter 5 says, "The Master said," which is also Confucius speaking, "the following should be about governance, about state affairs. To govern a country of 1,000 chariots, be respectful in your duties and trustworthy. Be frugal and love the people. Employ the people according to the seasons." Here, he is giving some teachings on governing a country. Dao means to govern or to lead. A country of 1,000 chariots should mean a nation with thousands of soldiers and horses, or a country with a very large population. Just like the feudal states we talked about before, which were often characterized by their significant populations and military strength, a country with an especially large number of people, what we now call a county or a relatively small independent country. If you want to govern such a place with especially many people, a country with tens of thousands of people, if you want to govern such a nation, as a leader, as a ruler, there are a few things you need to pay attention to. So what are these things? Some say there are 5 things below. Some say there are 3 things. If we go with the 5 things, the first is respecting affairs. Here, respect is quite similar to being cautious and careful. Be serious, careful, and cautious in everything you do. When doing anything at all, you cannot be careless, negligent, or indulgent. You should approach and handle things very seriously and with great caution and care. In your work and daily actions, you must not be overly relaxed or casual. Otherwise, it will lead to many undesirable consequences. The second important aspect is trust. When it comes to building trust, you should have both trust and credibility, because trust is very important. For a person to establish themselves in society, trust is indeed absolutely necessary for this to work. If there is no trust between countries, it will eventually lead to a lot of trouble. And if there is no trust between people, for example, within a family, if there are several members in the family, there must be trust between each person. There'll be trust between teachers and students. If there is no trust, many of our interpersonal relationships are built upon trust. If trust is absent, then many things simply can't be done. That's precisely why Buddhism often profoundly emphasizes faith, including the devoted disciples' faith in their esteemed teacher, or the disciples' deep faith in the sacred three jewels. All of these inherently involve both profound trust and complete reliance. This is very important. So when it really comes to establishing a new nation, one aspect is to have trustworthiness and reliability, whether it's wisdom or capability that makes people trust and rely on you. This is absolutely necessary. The third principle is frugality and economy. One must absolutely never be extravagant or wasteful, but should carefully conserve and preserve all the people's wealth and valuable resources. Whether it's food or clothing, nothing should ever be carelessly wasted or squandered. The fourth point is loving the people. Treat all citizens, all the common people, as if they were your own only child. Love them with very special care. The fifth crucial point is employing the right people at the most opportune time. If you genuinely need to mobilize the people, you should certainly seize certain favorable opportunities or make use of the right timing. For example, in the past, during the agricultural era, in the age of agriculture, especially in autumn and spring, during the times of planting and harvesting, farmers were extremely busy. If at this time the ruler demanded of them to stop their own work and serve the country instead, it would cause them to miss their best opportunity. Therefore, as a ruler, it's very important to pay attention to the timing of your people. This is extremely important. This is something that every feudal lord or ruler who governs a country should keep in mind, or in other words, every ruler should understand this. If we are running a business, or if we are indeed the head of an important organization, the very first thing we should certainly do is to do our own work diligently. In this way, others will truly come to trust you more completely. And when it comes to financial management, don't waste resources excessively for your own benefit. If you do this, you will also win the people's respect. And when you need to make use of them, or when you need to assign tasks, try your very best to always find effective and practical ways to carefully avoid conflicting with their schedules. This point is actually very important. Many of us, especially those with a bit of status or ability, we must always consider the time and efforts and resources of those below us. People in today's modern society are especially busy and tired. So at times like this, if we waste too much of their time, it really feels inconsiderate. Even when I teach classes, I try my best not to exceed. Even when I'm giving a special lecture, no matter how much I want to keep talking, I really make an effort to keep it within an hour and 15 minutes. This is a standard I set for myself. Sometimes I get excited and want to keep talking, and I can go hours, and it wouldn't really be a problem for me. But then I think people need to sleep and rest, and they have to go to work the next day. You see, people in today's society have so much work and so many things to do. So last year, some of our managing teachers held a meeting. Some teachers themselves had nothing to do, while the people below had to attend meetings that lasted 3 or 4 hours. In the very end, many of them would eventually fall asleep. I said, you really shouldn't hold such incredibly long meetings. Meetings should definitely be a bit shorter. So for many of our volunteers, some of the people who are in charge of them, you really have to consider other people's time. You see, even as a ruler, he also makes use of the people's time wisely. This idea of making effective use of the people's time wisely, for many of us in the past, I also explicitly said this to some of the teachers at our school. Some teachers also really love to engage in extensive conversation. Someone who is especially good at talking will just keep talking and talking up there by themselves. Especially if they haven't spoken for a long time, they'll definitely talk for the whole day. Some people just really love to talk. For us, it's still best to have meetings and do things with a time limit. For some important meetings, as a professional individual, you should always strive to condense and articulate what you have to say within the strictly allotted time frame. This practice is incredibly crucial and demonstrates respect for everyone's time and the meeting's agenda. Here as well, I think when it comes to teaching, teachers should try to keep the class duration under control. Now, the Dharma masters are doing a bit better in this regard, but some of our Dharma teachers here are still rather long-winded. Sometimes they're even more long-winded than I am. They just keep talking and talking, repeating themselves over and over again, just like, maybe I shouldn't use this analogy, but there is an analogy. But if I use this analogy, I probably wouldn't dare to. But indeed, repeating the same sentence over and over again, they think they're speaking brilliantly. while the listeners are exhausted and suffering. Of course, sometimes what needs to be said should be said. Like some Dharma teachers in certain places, they might talk for 3 or 4 hours. There are such cases. But I still hope that within the allotted time, whether it's a meeting or a speech, a Dharma talk or a counseling session, whatever you're doing, whatever you want to say, it's always best to have precise time control and management. If there is time control, that's truly the very best method. That's one important aspect. As for the second significant aspect regarding the topic we just discussed, as a monarch, if you desire to govern the country under your rule, there are a few important points to consider. In fact, this perspective is very similar to what Mipam Rinpoche articulated in his work, Advice to Kings. The sovereigns endowed with great mercy cherish their subjects as tenderly as an only son. What is being said here is very much the same. For a true and rightful monarch, he must treat his subordinates with love. It's not about saying, I'm your leader, or now that I'm the leader, whatever I say goes. Nowadays, especially many people in China, once they get promoted, they change. Their tone changes immediately, and so does their attitude. This is not good. They say, I'm the leader, why aren't you listening to me? If you don't listen, get out. This is not acceptable. Give up attachment to wealth, protect family more. If you look at the true monarchs of ancient times, they would give up their own lives and wealth to protect others. This verse is very important. I hope many of our leaders will remember this. It's not about saying, I'm your leader, and that you are here to serve me. From today on, I will act this way. Because when many Chinese emperors are portrayed, they are always shown sitting like this, while all of the assembled ministers below humbly bow down to them, showing their utmost respect. Whether you call it a habit or not, in all the various different aspects and situations, what kind of role should our leaders actually play? They should play the role of genuinely and sincerely serving others from deep within their hearts, as is frequently said and emphasized, that we are servants of all sentient beings, this kind of statement. But in reality, what we do is actually not right. Therefore, sometimes as leaders, we should truly have a deep kind of unconditional love and understanding for everyone. This love is not just superficial. It's like a mother who has only one child. What kind of deep love does she truly for that child? Now, many of us also have one child, and we understand this connection. No matter how mischievous they are, no matter what they do, they are especially loved. Actually, we should treat our dependents in this way. Some dependents are particularly ignorant, and some have various other reasons, which may lead to all kinds of behaviors. At such times, you should accept and tolerate their improper actions, and you should care for them even more, just as it is wisely said in the 400 stanzas on the middle way, isn't it? A mother with an only child, when the child is sick, loves and cares for them even more. As a bodhisattva, if the people around develop various afflictions, he truly loves them even more deeply. So we should also endeavor to treat others with this spirit. Now, for the last one, chapter 6. Chapter 6 is the same as the standards for being a good student and child. Here it also clearly states, the Master said, when at home, one should always be filial to your parents. When outside, one should always be respectful to your elders. At home, one should be filial, indeed, showing filial piety to one's parents. When going out towards your brothers and sisters, or towards others and friends, you should have a loyal kind of love. Be cautious and trustworthy, and love all people broadly. After that, you should be careful with your actions, speech, and thoughts. You need to have this kind of trustworthiness. And also, love all people broadly. You should have a broad-minded attitude to love everyone. Here, all people doesn't necessarily mean all sentient beings. Otherwise, in Confucian culture, loving all sentient beings in the world without boundaries. This is actually quite rare, but on the surface, to love all people, not to love individuals. Love all people broadly. It still means that towards all people in the world, we should treat everyone with love and draw close to the virtuous means to get close to good teachers and wise people, to be in close proximity to truly good teachers. If you still have ample energy after practicing these, then you can certainly study literature. Because what comes before is the basic foundation of being a person. If you have these qualities and have additional ability, then you can study literature. So what exactly can we see from this? The very foundation of being a person is indeed very important. The wise ancients considered filial piety, cautiousness, and genuinely loving others to be very important. Then, relying upon a very good teacher, they would begin to learn knowledge. But now the times are completely different. So what is it like now? All of our time and energy is spent entirely on learning knowledge. As for the foundation of being a person, or filial piety, these aspects are never valued at home, and schools never truly value them either. In the past, both virtue and talent were always emphasized and highly regarded. Both virtue and talent had to be present. But now, what is the only thing that is valued? It's simply a person's talent and skills. Indeed, in the present day, across various locations, people are actively organizing and conducting numerous tutoring classes and diverse interest classes. And in our area, we also run online classes and so on. But every time it comes to extra lessons or tutoring classes, the fees are especially high. Each class costs several hundred yuan. Learning in today's world is really quite painful. Many people are now buying knowledge with their money. But after you study and study, studying English, learning skills, acquiring all kinds of knowledge, in the end you actually lack a solid foundation. This is a very sad thing. At home, the principles of filial piety are indeed never truly taught, nor do they teach us to love all living beings and all of humanity, including how to conduct oneself, how to interact with others, and so on. These kinds of knowledge are not taught by teachers either. Teachers spend all day talking about so-called knowledge from textbooks. But in the end, how much of this knowledge can actually be effectively put to practical use in society? It's very difficult. Therefore, our society now has also, in fact, adopted some significant aspects of Western culture. In the Western world, knowledge is also highly valued and esteemed. As for character and morality, they are basically governed by the established law as the primary and fundamental rule. As long as you don't break the law, that's considered enough. But just as I mentioned earlier, in this particular way, the profound relationship between a master and their apprentice, and the relationship between parents and children, which originally should be filled with love, with respect, and with genuine feelings. But these feelings from a young age are basically diluted and not cultivated. If they are not cultivated, then the relationships between people cannot be sustained by reason alone. Sometimes emotions are truly and absolutely necessary. You see, sometimes they are indeed essential. If you just rely solely on rules, there are situations that rules simply cannot resolve. There are some subjective issues, and these subjective issues, perhaps in our current knowledge, there is a lack of love, a lack of morality, a lack of character, a lack of filial piety. In a society like this, in the end, people all become like robots. Everyone is indifferent, only concerned with interests. Apart from interests, there is just nothing between people at all. As long as there are benefits and advantages, I will depend on and rely on you. But if there's no real benefit for me, then what I specifically mentioned yesterday, so-called gratitude or repaying kindness, becomes completely meaningless. These things simply don't need to be mentioned at all. So sometimes I also tend to think in this particular way. In today's modern society, one must never, ever expect any gratitude in return for their efforts. As long as people don't forget kindness and act ungratefully, that's already quite enough. With this particular mindset, you might feel much more at ease with yourself. This is also certainly one of my personal experiences. I think for many of us indeed. No matter how you treat others, as long as they don't forget your kindness and act ungratefully, that's already a blessing. That's already very good. If you expect something from others, for example, in anything you do for other people, if you don't have any expectations, perhaps you might feel a little bit better in this particular way. This entire world, when compared to how it was before, is now quite different, even though our cultural genes still carry these values, which are indeed very precious. Humans are not robots, and humans are not animals either. If you look at animals, there is still a certain bond between parents and offspring. In my yard, there's a group of crows. I truly think they're actually quite remarkable creatures. I often observe their intricate family relationships. Sometimes when formidable enemies come, they all band together to bravely and effectively fight back. And when cherished guests arrive, friends coming from afar, as Confucius mentioned in this Analects, they are actually quite warm and welcoming. So sometimes, as human beings, when compared to animals, I'm not sure how good we humans are at being human. In any case, I hope that we can still, as human beings, act with both emotion and reason. No matter what our culture is like now, we should be compassionate and rational, full of life and feeling. And then there's our very own mind. Besides our flesh and blood, the Tathagata Garbha is within us. It contains many things. You can learn about this in the Uttara Tantra Shastra. All right, that's all for today. Sonam Dei Tansa Tobaya Tonai
de dhamma pasi kirgana jirano chupan chupun solen droa droa
Bandangara Badma Sodargye Bandangara Badma Sodargye Bandangara Badma Sodargye